What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? Weekend 3 of spring training is in the books, so let's see who's in the lead on those D-backs roster battles. Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. Week 3 is in the books. Spring training continues to chug along as we approach opening day, and the D-backs have been assigning players back to AAA, back to their minor league camp. The rosters are starting to cut down a little bit, so we'll check in on the roster battles after week 3 of spring training to see who's in the lead, and we'll also check in on the newbies and returners for the D-backs as well to see whose stock is up and whose stock is down this spring training. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are slowly approaching 1,000 subscribers. Want to hit that mark before opening day. We are so close, so please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now let's jump into the podcast and let's talk about those roster battles and who's in the lead this spring training, because I think the one that we've been keeping the closest eye on is either the number 5 starter battle or the battle for backup shortstop. So of course, we're going to start segment number 1 with those two camp battles. The battle for the number 5 starter might be tightening up and really might come down to the wire, mostly because every turn through the rotation or every outing that the candidates have, Tommy Henry, Ryan Nelson, and Slade, they all seem to be scuffling right now. Tommy Henry, his stock is down. I mean, over his last couple starts, he's given up 8 earned runs. He gave up 5 earned runs on Saturday to the Kansas City Royals. 3 home runs allowed. He has not looked sharp recently. He came into camp as probably the leader to win the number 5 job. All the conversation has been Tommy Henry in the lead for that position. So he seems to be scuffling right now, which opens the door for the rest of the candidates. Ryan Nelson, he had scuffled a little bit in his most recent outing. The same with Slade. Slade definitely seems like the distant third right now in the competition. Ryan Nelson already has some experience starting with the D-backs. He started at the tail end of the 2022 season. He came out of camp as the number 5 starter last year for the D-backs and struggled to start the year. Maybe the D-backs want to start the year with Tommy Henry despite him scuffling recently because they already know what it looks like with Tommy Henry. He's already the more experienced guy, so maybe they want to start the year with Tommy Henry. But regardless, whoever the D-backs pick, Tommy Henry or Ryan Nelson, both of them have had their ups and downs this spring training. Both of them have had their ups and downs in the regular season. Both of them are both experienced starters with the D-backs, so you really can't go wrong with either of them in terms of what you know you're expecting from either one. Tommy Henry is coming off an injury from last year, so I think we probably give him a little bit more grace in terms of his return from that injury. But Ryan Nelson is someone that also has been working on his stuff this offseason. I think we've seen an improved Ryan Nelson this spring training, and even though Tommy Henry came into camp in the lead, because he is coming off that injury, maybe it's taking him a little bit longer to ramp up. And the fact that Ryan Nelson has looked like an improved starter and pitcher this spring training, maybe the D-backs decide, you know what, even though we thought Tommy Henry at first, Ryan Nelson has looked improved. He's been grinding this offseason. He's been mowing down hitters in spring training. Maybe we want to go in his direction instead, and maybe we bring out Tommy Henry from the pen as the long reliever to start the season, or we send him to AAA to get some starts in the rotation. So, again, can't go wrong with either one. I think the gap is closing between a Henry and a Ryan Nelson. I could see Ryan Nelson leapfrogging Tommy Henry if the next outing we see of Nelson is like 3 innings, 5 strikeouts. I could definitely see that. But for now, stock down for Tommy Henry. He's still in the lead. Ryan Nelson stock up as he's getting closer to leapfrogging Tommy Henry in this competition. And then Slade still a distant third with his stock down. Battle for backup shortstop. This competition is getting a little bit easier as well, as we saw the D-backs top prospect, Jordan Lawlar, get optioned to AAA. He has looked pretty good this spring training, but as the D-backs have said, they want to get him basically opportunities to play every day. That's how they want him to develop, by getting opportunities to play as much as possible. His slash line wasn't exactly there this spring training, but that's okay. He's gonna go down and start the season with the Reno Aces. He's coming off a really strong 2023 minor league season, so a full year of Jordan Lawlar in AAA. We'll see how that goes, and if anything ever happens to Geraldo Perdomo throughout the season, expect Jordan Lawlar to be on the short list of D-backs call-ups to be a backup infielder. We know he's got the speed. We know he's a dynamic athlete, and I think we still all love his upside and still think he can be a core building block to this D-backs franchise. The D-backs are not trying to rush his development. Right now, with Geraldo Perdomo coming off the All-Star season and some other good candidates for your backup shortstop, it's not like you have to rush the development of a Jordan Lawlar. So the D-backs are going to play it smart, play it slow, and be patient with Jordan Lawlar and his development and start him out with the Reno Aces for 2024. So that leaves you the other candidates for backup shortstop as Blaze Alexander, Kevin Newman, and Elvis Andrus. Blaze Alexander continues to crush it this spring training. His slash line is now up to 406 average, 406 OBP, and a 594 slugging percentage. He's looked absolutely insane. Probably the second best position player on the D-backs this spring training, because of course Ketel Marte looks like a man possessed right now, but Blaze Alexander is not far behind him. He's making elite defensive plays in the field every single time he plays, diving for balls, using his speed and instincts to get to balls and close gaps and just take the perfect angles. Like, he's been able to generate double plays. Like, as a defensive player, he looks ready for the major leagues. And as an offensive player, he also looks ready. I mean, you go on StatCast, you look at every game log for Blaze Alexander, you look at the exit velocity. I mean, everything he's smoking, even if it's not a hit, his lineouts are also like 108 off the bat. Like, he has crushed everything this spring training. Then I think he has to be in the lead for the backup shortstop role. You still got Kevin Newman in the mix. He had a home run over the weekend, so he's still in the competition, but I feel like Blade has to be in the lead over him. We all know Kevin Newman just doesn't really provide you anything in terms of a ceiling offensively or defensively. Blaze Alexander clears him in every area. Elvis Andrus, veteran, still has some name value, but I do think he's a little bit over the hill as a player. I still think he could play solid, above average defense, still a good defender, and still a good base runner. I still think he has a ton of speed. So if he is a backup infielder along with Blaze Alexander, I don't mind that. Like I've said, maybe the best combination for the backup infield is to put both Blaze and Elvis as your backup infielders, because as you saw on Sunday, Blaze was playing third base. So maybe the D-backs do want to say, you know what, Blaze is our backup shortstop, Blazers are backup middle infielder, along with Elvis Andrews, who can also play second, third, shortstop. Both of those guys are versatile. Both of those guys could play basically all over the infield except for first base. So I think it gives the D-backs a little bit more defensive versatility and more just higher upside speed if you pick those two to be your backup infielder. So I think those are the two most dynamic athletes going for the backup infield spots, and those would probably be my two picks to win the backup infield spots for the D-backs this spring training. Now we'll talk about the extra outfielder, and we'll check in on the newbies for the D-backs this spring training. But of course, if you want to bet on the D-backs to potentially win the World Series in 2024, then the best place to do that is FanDuel Sportsbook, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. If you bet $5, they'll give you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's my favorite thing to do when I signed up for the app, because that first bet is always like a feel-good bet too on FanDuel. So if you want to win some money, please go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. My favorite thing to do on the app, honestly, is the same game parlay, because now that we're back in the swing of baseball season, every time that the D-backs are playing, I'm going to try and win money. So I'm going to do a little parlay where I do the D-backs money line. I do Corbin Carroll over on total bases. Whenever it's at like 1.5, I think that's going to be a lock. Then I do Ketel Marte RBI. If that 3-leg parlay pays out at plus 300, I'm a lock to place some money down. And if you want to be a lock to place some money down, and potentially win some money, again, just place $5 for your first bet and you can get $150 guaranteed. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's check in on a few more spring training battles. Let's talk about the extra outfielder, because the D-backs have to decide with, of course, Lourdes Gurriel, Alek Thomas, Corbin Carroll, Jock Peterson, and Randall Grichuk. That's like 4.5 outfielders, and you would have to decide if you want to add another outfielder into the mix on opening day roster, because if you do that, then that only leaves you one backup infielder. So it's been a big question marks as to what the D-backs should do with that role this spring training, and with some of these minor league reassignments, it does make the competition a little bit clearer. Christian Robinson, someone who has had his up and downs this spring training, but I think overall has been a positive spring training for Christian Robinson. He got reassigned to the minor leagues. So did Jorge Barrosa, who came in as a fan favorite this spring training, as a guy who definitely was in that competition to be an extra outfielder. He is going to start the season in Reno, but I think over Christian Robinson, Jorge Barrosa will probably get a crack at the major leagues this season before Christian Robinson, and I definitely think he will get a call-up at some point this season. And then also Tristan English was optioned. He's definitely a distant third of the guys I just mentioned, but as a guy who I think is out of options potentially, or going to be out of options soon, he's just someone I think we should keep an eye on as a potential option for the D-backs to get called up in the near future. And then, so that just leaves really just Jake McCarthy as the only other guy vying for a backup outfield position on opening day. And I got to say that the vibe right now for Jake McCarthy is not looking good. His slash line this spring training is 185, 214, 259. And all the reports are saying it looks like Jake McCarthy will be on the outside looking in for this opening day roster. He will most likely start the season in AAA. And Jake McCarthy still, if he plays well in AAA, still can play his way into being a trade chip and maybe being moved to a team that could definitely use his services right now, because the D-backs are just a little bit clogged in their outfield. Still, Gurriel, Carroll, and Thomas still got guys like Jorge Barrosa in the minor leagues. Still got Jock Peterson, still got Randall Grichuk. Maybe the D-backs aren't afraid to move a Jake McCarthy, and maybe Jake McCarthy himself is not afraid to be moved if he's able to find an opportunity where he gets to play a little bit more on a major league roster. And then, so if Jake McCarthy doesn't make the opening day roster, that means the competition for the backup infield makes it a little bit tougher. Emmanuel Rivera, he had 2 hits on Sunday. I would say his stock is looking just solid right now as he battles for maybe backup third / backup first base. Pavin Smith, he had a hit on Saturday. He is batting .318 this spring training, but still the same weaknesses as always for Pavin Smith. His slugging just hasn't really been there this spring training. His slugging is still under 400. And considering the way his defense has looked in the past, it just feels like he's probably on the outside looking in when you're looking at the battle for the backup infield spots. It just doesn't offer you probably as much offensive or defensive upside as Emmanuel Rivera. It's not like Manny offers an astonishing upside either, but I think Manny's upside is a little bit higher than Pavin, so I would say he's ahead of Pavin in the pecking order. Still got Jace Peterson out there on a contract as well. I think because of the money he's getting paid, I would say he's ahead of Pavin in the pecking order too. And then, of course, you still got the other guys that we mentioned earlier in the backup for the shortstop. So altogether, you got like Elvis, Kevin Newman, Blaze, Pavin, Manny, and Jace Peterson. Those 6 players vying for 2 backup spots in the infield. Blaze seems to be a guy that should be in the lead. I mean, the way he's played this spring training, Blaze Alexander is not in the lead for a backup infield spot. I don't know what's going on. He can play all over the infield. He's got some pop. He's got some speed. He's an electric player. He's easily someone that the fans would gravitate toward. I feel like Blaze has to get one of the backup infield spots, because if he doesn't, I would be absolutely shocked. And then honestly, if Blaze does win a backup infield spot, I don't even care who gets the other backup spot at that point. I would probably lean Elvis Andrus, but if you tell me it's Jace Peterson, Emmanuel Rivera, it's all gravy to me at the end of the day. Just make sure Blaze is guaranteed one of those backup infield spots for me. Please and thank you, Torey Lovullo. And then before we wrap up segment number 2, just a quick check-in on backup catcher. Jose Herrera went 0 for 2 on Sunday. Meanwhile, Tucker Barnhart went 1 for 3 on Saturday. His slash line up to 333, 385, 417. Jose Herrera is the guy with more experience in that D-backs clubhouse, has already been on the roster for a little bit of time now, but has never really done anything offensively, not really a great catcher, in terms of framing or blocking balls. It's not like he's an elite defensive catcher that just can't hit. He's kind of just average all the way around. Tucker Barnhart, longtime veteran MLB catcher, and I think he probably has the lead right now with how he swung the bat, and considering his resume, he just feels like a more stable option at this point. I feel like he's probably in the lead for that backup catcher role. Now we'll talk about how the D-backs bullpen is shaking up this spring training, and talk about how some of the newbies have looked for the D-backs this spring. But before we get into that conversation, I first want to talk to you guys about Amazon Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues at college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game's analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to the date on all of the latest in the worlds of sports, March Madness, WNBA, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for the personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. Now let's get back to the show. Let's check in on how the bullpen is shaking up for the D-backs so far this spring training. Again, we got some assignments to the minor league camp. Brandon Hughes, Justin Martinez, Christian Mena, and of course Peter Schreiber is all going down to the minor league camp. And Justin Martinez, someone that I think is an intriguing option for the D-backs at some point this season. He needs to refine his pitches a little bit more, but we know if his command is ever together, this is a guy that's whipping 102, 103, 104, his fastball. So if this guy is ever able to put it together, ever able to command that fastball, he could be a real weapon out the D-backs bullpen. Christian Mena, I still think is like 21 years old, something crazy, super young. Definitely seems like he has potential as a mid-rotation starter down the line. I don't think the D-backs are going to rush his development. I think he's more of an option maybe at the end of this season to be called up, get that little Ryan Nelson, Dre Jameson treatment. We get the call up at the end of the season to, make a little appearance. But I think 2025 could be the year that maybe Christian Mena makes a little impact with the D-backs. And then Brandon Hughes and Peter Strzelecki, two guys who are veteran options that are going to start the season in Reno that could get called up throughout the year to make an impact with the D-backs. So we'll see what happens to those guys, but they all are going down to the minor leagues. Kyle Nelson, Luis Frias, both gave up earned runs on Sunday. Kyle Nelson in the mix to be one of the two lefties out the D-backs bullpen. He has not been that crisp so far this spring training. We'll see how much that weighs on the D-backs decision. In the past, he has been a solid option for the D-backs. He was pretty good in 2022. Not very good in 2023. So we'll see how much the D-backs weigh the history of Kyle Nelson versus performance this spring training. Luis Frias gave up a couple of earned runs on Sunday. But he's someone that has been very good this spring training. And he is someone that is on that bubble to make the opening day roster. I think he's very close of either making it or just be on the outside looking in. But I think Luis Frias will have a decent sample size with the D-backs out the pen this year. If he does make the opening day roster, he is a potential breakout candidate for the D-backs out the pen. Luis Frias is someone that has a really nasty arsenal. He just has weaknesses in terms of his command and giving up loud contact, but we know his stuff has always been there. And if he's right, I think Luis Frias could be a real weapon out the pen for the D-backs. Joe Mantiply, he gave up a couple earned runs on Saturday. I would still say he's a lock for the pen, but he has looked pretty shaky this spring training. I wonder how much that weighs on the D-backs. Sal Frank, he gave up an earned run on Saturday too. I'll say both him and Kyle Nelson have not looked that crisp this spring training. All the lefties out the pen for the D-backs this spring training have not looked that crisp, but hopefully it doesn't translate to the regular season. Hopefully they're just trying to work on things, trying to work on their pitches, and they're not even concerned with the results themselves, because that always seems to be the sentiment out these pitchers. It's always, I'm just trying to locate, or I'm just working on something new. I don't actually care about the results. So hopefully that sentiment can be said for the lefties out the D-backs pen, because they have not looked that crisp so far this spring training. And then a little shout out, Humberto Castellanos. He's not making the opening day roster, but he's been perfect this spring training. So just want to give a little shout out to him, because he's someone that has gotten opportunities to be a starter in the past with the D-backs, has gotten opportunities out the pen in the past with the D-backs. So he looks like he could be playing his way into more opportunities in 2024 with how he's looked this spring training with the Arizona Diamondbacks. How about some of the newbies? Let's talk about them. Jock Peterson, he had his first home run on Friday. He looked really good. 3 RBIs on Friday. 103 off the bat. I like the way he's swinging his bat. Eugenio Suarez had a pretty good weekend as well. He collected 3 hits between Friday and Saturday. Really excited to see the kind of power those two could bring to the lineup because we know those are 2 true sluggers. Jock from the left side's got monster power. Eugenio Suarez from the right side, 49 home run season back in 2019. Want to see the kind of power impact those 2 guys can have in the lineup with the speed of the Carrolls and the Alek Thomases and the Perdomos of the world. Let's see the D-backs get chaotic once again when it comes to their offense. Eduardo Rodriguez, he had his best outing so far this spring training on Saturday. 4 innings pitched, 1 earned run. That velocity starting to get a little bit closer to where we want it, but not just yet. He said he's 80% of where he wants to be. That last 20% is that velocity that we just mentioned, but do like to see our newbies start to get on track. I think they all look good. Randall Grichuk start to do some BP. So it looks like all the signings and the acquisitions from the D-backs offseason so far are starting to pick it up a little bit as we get closer to the regular season. And just some quick highlights and lowlights for some D-backs returners from their spring training performances this past weekend. Miguel Castro, he continues to look horrendous this spring training. Really nervous about his prospects for this upcoming season because he struggled big time in the second half of the year. And so far this spring, he has looked really, really bad. Ketel Marte, on the other hand, has looked absolutely phenomenal. His slash line is now up to 542 average, 593 OBP, and a 750 slugging. Like I said, monster season incoming for Ketel Marte. Geraldo Perdomo showed some signs of life this weekend. He had a hit on Sunday and Friday. He has really been struggling this spring training offensively, but finally showed some signs of life. Merrill Kelly looked absolutely dominant in his debut on Friday. 2 innings, 3 strikeouts. I think 16 of his 21 pitches went for strikes. He's someone that has had a very slow offseason in terms of ramping it up. You wouldn't notice. I think Merrill Kelly, don't be surprised if maybe Merrill Kelly is the guy to watch out as the Cy Young candidate from the D-backs rotation because I think Merrill Kelly is that good. And with the confidence he might have gained in himself from this past postseason, like Merrill Kelly might be on a different stratosphere mentally in terms of his confidence level right now. So don't be surprised if Merrill Kelly plays himself into this Cy Young candidate conversation in 2024. And then the final thing I want to talk about, Brandon Pfaadt. He struggled on Sunday. The first inning against the Dodgers did not look good, but he did like how he had a couple up and down innings, and he thought his stuff was the best of any start he's had so far this spring training. So despite the rough first inning, Brandon Pfaadt was pleased. So if Pfaadt was pleased, I guess I was pleased as well. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news, coverage, and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.